we talk about what to do versus what to pay attention to, that's a really important distinction that a lot of coaches often miss, is that they try to, and there's something called the righting reflex, RIGHTING, which is I see a problem, I must fix a problem. I see a problem, I must fix a problem. And rather than spending a moment to identify all the problems, they start fixing these things, which is why they feel like they're constantly putting out fires and they're not gaining any traction, because they're truly not identifying which elements are going to be the high impact ones. And so it's easiest to, handle a client complaint, right? It's harder cognitively and experientially to go through and sort strategy and industry trends, right? And then to kind of bridge the gap between the two. And so the MSA method, and the decision making matrix here effectively kind of blend the two. And the decision making matrix allows you to list everything that you should be doing from a behavior or an action outcome. And then you categorize it. Is it going to be very hard? Is it going to take a lot of effort? Is it going to take a lot of resources? Is another synonym for effort in this case when you're looking at the matrix, right? The other thing that you want to look at is, well, if it's going to take a lot, if it's going to take a little, obviously if it's like 2 seconds, might as well just do it. Or on the other end of the spectrum, if it's going to take a lot of, if it's going to yield a lot of impact. So let's say that you wanted to, as a coach, reorganize your entire coaching system, which is something we've done with some of our coaching clients that are trying to build these businesses that are $135K a year. And, there's one particular person, shout out to Leah. I'm sure she'll love hearing her name, but she has had a lot of high impact stuff that we've worked on here. And admittedly, it's been high effort. There's been a lot of data collection. There's been a lot of data cleaning, and there's been a lot of data basically kind of like finessing. And those are the things that you have to do before you even start to make sense of the information you're collecting. And I think a lot of people forget that. And so it's important to start collecting it so that way eventually you can look at it. And that's what you want to start to use to identify, is this something that's going to be very impactful? We had her at one point go through every single week of her 6-month program. And we looked at, I think it was like somewhere near 40 clients or something like that she had on her roster. And we looked at where they dropped off or where their success rate, which some people call a compliance rate, like how much of their plan did they do that week? And that is very time consuming because you have to go into the app, you have to pull up each person, you have to look at each week that they're looking at, and you have to do that times however many clients you have. But that's the stuff that starts to help you understand like what you need to change. Do you need to do that up front? Probably not. In fact, you probably don't have enough information to do that. So this is kind of the catch-22 of where people say, I need to wait. I need to learn more before I start getting, my hands dirty. Frankly, if you're going to do that, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to understand where the gaps are that you can then quickly solve. And everything becomes high effort, high impact. Well, if you don't have the resources and you don't have the bandwidth because you're working a traditional 9-to-5 job, and you're also now a family person, right? You have all these things that are pulling you away. You can't afford to do something that's high effort necessarily, which means you maybe have to give up on the impact a little bit, or you have to sit and think about it just a little bit longer to organize these things so that way you're doing the biggest impact with the least amount of effort. And I think that to couch this, Abraham Lincoln had a really great saying that if he had 6 hours to cut down a tree, he would spend the first 4 sharpening his axe. And I think that that's really where a lot of people these days are thinking, if I do this, if I jump in, if I start going to town, sometimes you just get really exhausted, and it's not usually because of the effort, it's more because you're in your head. But, spend some time, collect the information, look at the information, and then constantly reorganize that into effort, impact, and then use the MSA model. MSA method. I haven't had much sleep recently. It's fine. But when you're thinking about what do you want to do? Just because it's high effort, high impact, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to simplify that thing yet. Maybe that's something you need to maintain, that maybe that's something you need to amplify. But frankly, if it's high effort, you really can't amplify it because it takes too much of your resources and your attention being one of those things. So that's where maybe you need to simplify it because it's something that's giving you a lot of return, but it is taking and sapping you of your ability to do the other things. So hopefully that kind of just makes sense of taking these items and thinking through them a little bit of like, what do I need to pay attention to? And the first part is you have to pay attention in general, and you have to start taking some notes and then reviewing them. I mean, Steve, anything else that you have on that? Just bridging the gap.
I think And I don't want people to mistake this as a reason to go slow.
Mhm.
There still needs to be urgency in figuring out what you need to be working on. Uh, Collecting data or figuring out what you need to work on can still take 8 hours in a day. And it might sound like a long day of doing something that's probably not enjoyable, but
Mhm.
the faster you get that done, the faster you can get to work. There's some truth to, let me go out and solve a problem and then, just keep going and eventually I'll solve the right problem.
Mhm.
But there's also some truth to, every time you solve a problem, you change and alter all of the other problems that exist and potentially create additional
Yeah.
problems. So you want to balance that kind of urgency with also deliberateness and figuring it out. But
Mhm.
you need to have a general lay of the land. You should be able to answer some basic questions about your business, the customer service side of things, the client experience, what they're
Yeah.
going through. And with that, you probably have a gut instinct of, oh, I need to solve this thing. Great. Go get a lot of data around that thing. Not a month's worth of data, not a month's worth of time, but spend a day or two, figure that component out, and then continue moving forward on solving what is the most urgent based upon, again, input and effort versus outcome and kind of the ROI, if you will, on there. And
Mhm.
that's going to be the thing that you need to go focus on. So don't
Yeah.
use it as a reason to not move, but also don't recklessly move because you're going to end up creating more problems for yourself downstream that you have to solve anyways.